How's it going, guys? Balder here, and I am doing another tutorial video. This time I'm going to be talking about BVR, Beyond Visual Range, in the SU-27. This is something that I always wanted to do because, if you guys haven't noticed, there is this one guy who's kind of famous in the flight simming community called Ralphie Dude, who mentioned something about BVR combat. And the one thing that he mentioned was that you should never fire a missile at maximum range. Now, I don't know if he was talking about the F-15 or just in general, but there is something that I respectfully disagree with him when we're talking about BVR firing at range in general. And there is a reason why. It is called harassment. Not in the weird SJW kind of way, but we're talking about harassment in Beyond Visual Range combat. And what I mean by that is that harassment is basically firing a missile, not to intentionally bring down a target, though it would be nice if it does bring down a target, but more so, the purpose of harassing an opponent with missiles would be to get them distracted, so that they're on the defensive, because even if you do fire at maximum range, they still have to go into a defensive to break away and break the lock, because, well, when you fire at range, it's going to hit unless the plane does otherwise. So when we look at the F-15 versus the SU-27, the advantages really boil down to what type of weapons the planes use. For example, the F-15 uses the M120 AMRAAM. This is actually a very good missile. It is active radar, meaning that it will guide itself into the target. You don't need a lot of assistance from the F-15's radar. You will for a little while, but not much. And once it starts emitting a radar signature on its own and guides itself into the target, the F-15 doesn't have to do anything. In fact, the F-15 could explode into a million pieces, and the AMRAAM will still guide itself into the target. There is a disadvantage, though. The M120 does have a limit when it comes down to range. It's quite long range, however, if you look at the specifications, the M120 doesn't nearly have as much range as the SU-27's R-27ER. While the R-27ER is a semi-active radar missile, meaning that the plane always has to keep a lock on in order to reach its target, the 27ER also has a longer range, meaning that you could fire earlier. Now, if you're wondering, if you do fire off at range with the R-27ER, the odds of you actually hitting your target are close to none. However, as I said, the point of harassment isn't to bring down the target, it's to suppress the target. And since usually you have 4 R-27ERs, or up to 6, then what you can do is that you can keep firing missiles at the target, keep it suppressed, all the way until you run out of missiles. So, if you shoot all 4 R-27s that the SU-27 has and none of them make it, you'll eventually reach the range where you can fire off 2 R-27ETs. Now, if those don't make it, then you have a spare 4 R-73s that you can go into dogfight with, and the SU-27 is really good at dogfighting. Now, if none of these missiles by chance make it, I have no idea what to tell you, but at the very least, you have quite a bit of firepower with the SU-27. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Alright, so now we're in the SU-27, and we currently have a bogey on our radar. Well, not really a bogey, but a bandit, you know what I mean. Terminology can suck. So, if you notice on the left bar, it shows you the various ranges. On the top bar, that's the maximum range. The maximum possible range where you can fire a missile and it'll reach your target. The middle one is the ideal range. Go fire near that, and the odds of you hitting your target increase tremendously. And of course below that one, if you go under that, then you can't fire it. So anyway, as we approach the target, I'm going to try to reach his altitude so that I'm not at a disadvantage. I have my R-27ERs armed, and I'm going to wait until I am in range. And the moment I am in range, I am going to fire these missiles. So we'll wait for a moment. And Fox 1. Alright, so now this guy is going to go on the defensive, or at least should go on the defensive. But strangely enough, if I recall, this was recorded earlier, he's going to fire on me. As such, I'm actually going to wait a little while, since I am fighting an F-4 Phantom. This guy has semi-active missiles. So I'm going to fire, and now at this point, I'm going to go on the defensive because he seems to not be breaking his line. But now he actually did finally break his line. But neither of the missiles have hit, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to fire a third one. That one, as I recall, didn't do anything. But hey, I have plenty of more missiles to go around, so at this point, I'm going to be firing the fourth. So, there we go. There's our fourth. I switch to R-27 ETs. And then I decide to fire them off because I am at range. Now, as you can see, this plane is completely suppressed. All he can do is go on the defensive, because if he doesn't, he's going to die. But regardless, he's actually going to die anyway. So, there we go. After all that, he's finally defeated. I destroyed the enemy. I totally made this plane my bitch. The problem is that this is an F-4 Phantom. In the multiplayer servers, you're not going to be facing off against the F-4. At least not yet. So, what exactly happens when you fight against an F-15? Well, the F-15 actually has his own way of fighting BVR, and I'm going to show you right about now. Alright, so now we're in the F-15. The first thing that you generally do is that you want to change your radar mode to TWS. Once you do that, then you don't have to lock onto your target in order to actually track him. That's why it's called TWS, track while scan. You basically paint the target. This guy has absolutely no idea that he is being locked onto. Granted, I am fighting a MiG-21, so he doesn't really know either way. He just knows that an enemy radar is there. But needless to say, unlike the SU-27, you usually don't go and fire out of range, or just barely in range. What you do is that it's basically the same thing, except the display is on the right side of the HUD. The top one is the maximum range, the mid one is the ideal range. So I'm not going to listen to that AI lady. I'm just going to wait for a little while. Now, once you finally fire off... Alright, there we go. He actually did shoot at me, but needless to say, you do have this countdown timer. Once that T reaches 0, that is pitbull time, then you brake, and now what you can do afterwards is that the radar missile will guide itself into the target, which did so wonderfully. So, when you see an F-15, it's coming towards you, then all of a sudden it deviates, then what that means is that it fired off its active radar missile, it pitbulled, so now it's guiding itself, and you're in for a world of hurt, because odds are, if you're fighting against a player and he is smart enough, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. You're probably going to get shot down. But needless to say, this guy has been shot down. I kind of did some insult to injury after this, because this guy was still flying. I didn't know if he was still down. I think at this point I concluded that he was down, but might as well shoot him down anyway. I lose a little bit of control in the F-15, sue me, but at the very least I'll fire my AIM-9. Another thing you'll notice is that the American missiles really don't emit as much smoke as the Russian missiles, so they're a lot more sneaky in that regard. Either way, back to the 27. So, I'm not sure exactly what happened here, but I believe it has to do with jamming. It's just that the last time I dealt with a jamming opponent, I didn't keep breaking lock this way. But one thing you need to know is that the F-15, it will have jammers, and you don't need a jamming pod in order to jam, as opposed to the SU-27, which does in fact need a jamming pod in order for you to jam. Needless to say, I kept trying, and eventually I did get a lock on. It's just taking a goddamn while, because, I don't know, is that part of jamming? Where it's impossible to grab onto your target? I don't know if that's a glitch or not, or if it's something new, because last update I flew on the 104th in, you could lock on and it'll stay locked on. So, not too entirely sure about that, but I'm guessing that is a feature of the jamming system because I had no problems locking on to the F4. So either way, if you give it enough time, then eventually your radar will burn through the jamming and it will give you an azimuth. So, still quite a ways away, I decided to fire off range. Now I don't know if you can see this because of a bit rate, but eventually he's going to fire an AIM-120 at me. Now he does so at range, and I can actually see it because, well, my computer monitor is pretty sharp. But I decided to fire 2 at him to see if he breaks. Though he's starting to deviate, and that's a sign that he reached Pitbull. But now, definitely he reached Pitbull, so I'm breaking offensive. But since he fired at range, it's going to be easier for me to break the AIM-120's lock. Even though it is an active radar, it's still going to run out of energy before it reaches me because he fired out of range. Now, strangely enough, I was able to hit him on the second missile, which is kind of unusual, but he waited way too long in order to evade, so, well, what can you do at that point? He basically stood there too long, waited too long, the missile got too close, and while I give him credit for firing at range and actually trying to take a shot off me, you know, by the time my missile got there, it still had enough energy to prevent any type of evasion. Anyway, that's it for this little tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys have anything else to say to that, then please let me know. If you have any better tips or ideas, also let me know, because I'm not perfect. This is just what I found to be pretty effective in the SU-27 BVR. Also, for those of you who are unaware, I also created a VidMe channel, where I also post my videos. I'm going to be posting every video that I make on YouTube from here on, also onto VidMe. I'm also going to be posting on YouTube as well, but there will also be some extra content as well, if you guys enjoy that. One example is that I created a Danger Zone music video. Just out of DCS, figured out, hey, why not? But either way, I'll put a link in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed. And as I said, if there's anything else you want to add, feel free to comment. I always like expanding my mind. But with that said, you guys have a nice day.